You should get a little button that says that you're aware I'm recording, for those of you that aren't used to that. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oops, I did that wrong. We want this one. So the Wish You Were Here initiative has 4 different categories that is a part of what we're talking about. And I'm going to introduce you to one of them, which is San Jose and the cultural history of San Jose. So San Jose is a city with a past. In fact, this is from 1905, the old light tower that stood on Market Street and lit up all around. And it was an icon that is an art project that is coming back. There was also the old post office. Those of us nowadays probably recognize it as the San Jose Museum of Art. And then that's the old City Hall from 1893 that sat in what is now Cesar Chavez Plaza, directly across the street from where the Fairmont Hotel sits. But before all of that, the Ohlone, this was their land, and their territory stretched from the upper portion of the East Bay all the way down to Salinas. And each one of those sections of different colors, the different languages that were spoken amongst the Ohlone. And their culture and their whole background and history is this place. But as with, changes, as with the advancer, those that brought in religion and started to develop and take over, it introduced to San Jose more cultures. And we have an array of ethnicities, we have an array of cultures and celebrations. And this is from the mid-70s for a Mexican Independence Day parade. And then, of course, there's a very large Vietnamese population that is a part of this community, and they have a Tet festival that is not to be missed if you're in the area. And then going back a little bit, this was the original Chinatown. And the earlier photo that I showed that had City Hall, it was before that. And this actually sat where the Fairmont Hotel sits today. And not unlike today, there was a lot of unrest and a lot of hatred that was pointed towards the Chinese community that was here in San Jose. And this was burnt down. And there was a gentleman in San Jose, his name was Heinlein, and he took some of his property and he allowed the Chinese community to come in and build a new Chinatown and a new community for themselves so that it could be safe. And this is a little bit away from downtown. In fact, if you look at the map on the left, you'll notice that it says Japantown because it was Chinatown before it was Japantown. And it slowly dissolved again because of the unrest that was being shown towards them. And then, of course, we had Japanese immigrants that were coming in and starting to immigrate in and live in that space. And they brought with them their beautiful, rich culture. And these images are ones that I've taken from the Obon Festival that happens in San Jose's Japantown, which is one of the last, there's 3 left in all of the United States, and we have one of them. And this festival, the Obon, happens usually in July. It's a celebration of their ancestry, and it's a marvelous opportunity. But I'm showing you these things so that you understand that there's a whole lot of cultural history that we may not be aware of. And this is your opportunity to show us that. And so for the Wish You Were Here, it serves as a way to collect multidisciplinary contributions of visual and text-based work focused on placemaking in San Jose with these themes of sheltering in place during the pandemic, sustainability, cultural history, generational connectivity, and transformation. So now let's talk about those postcard design contest dates. This second round began on March 1st, and we have a due date that's closing it on Friday, May 14th at midnight. And as Rhonda had mentioned earlier, the Natalie and James Thompson Gallery, which is our big gallery that is on the university campus, will be opening in fall 2021. So here's some submission information. A lot of data here. Let me break it down. Rhonda mentioned there's an art piece that can be taken away. That means you're going to design something for both the front and the back. There's also 10 designs that will be chosen, and this has to do with the kiosks, and those are the one side. You're printing, you're doing your imagery, your text, your graphic design on the front side of that card, or you can choose to do both and enter to both, but you will need to do both sides for your submission in case it is not chosen for the community postcards. This is our template. Ultimately, we are going to be creating 4x6 postcards. You don't need to worry about that too much. What you do need to worry about is that this template shows us a few lines when we're dealing with printing. And that red band that goes around the outside is called a bleed. This, we want your picture or your graphic design or your text, not necessarily your text unless that's an artistic choice, needs to bleed out to that border. The inner line border is called the cut line. This is where the print shop is going to physically cut the card. And then there's a third line there. It's the light blue that's on inside. It's called a safety. If you're using text and it is not an artistic choice to have it fall off the card, you need to keep it within that blue line so that it shows and doesn't have the potential of being trimmed off. For the backside, there's a whole separate template for that. And again, you still have those bleed, cut, and safety lines that you want to work within and pay attention. But the US Postal Service has some rules, and that grayed out area needs to stay blank. So we can't really have picture there. It needs to be left alone. So now I'm going to take you into Photoshop. So in Photoshop, we are going to drop this template in. And at this point, I am going to switch off of this and go to Photoshop. Now, the easiest way to do this is once you have downloaded your files, oh dear. Desktop, there we go. There's going to be two templates, a 1 and a 2. The 1 is the front side, and I'm going to start with that one. So when I click this and drag it down to my Photoshop, I now have the template. This red band, we need to bleed our image all the way out to the end. Just inside of that is where it gets cut. And then this blue one is the safety line. And let me turn off my grids. There we go. This blue line is for safety. Keep your text inside of that. If you're typing a poem, if you're doing something that's a haiku or word, random thoughts, keep them inside that blue line so we don't lose the text. So I'm going to be working with some images that I took from that Oban festival so that I can celebrate the culture that we have here in Japantown. And I am going to, within Photoshop, give me my menu. I'm going to click File. I'm going to come down to Embed. And this is where I will grab what I call Shanghai Neon. And I'm going to click Place. And it has dropped the image on top of my template. And the way Photoshop works, everything's in a layer. The one on the bottom is the lowest rung of the ladder. And as you climb up the ladder are the most recent and what's going to have the most power over everything below it. And so we've lost the template, as you can see. The easiest way to deal with this right now is in opacity. If we grab opacity and bring this down to about 50, I can see my image. I can also see my template. And at this point, I am going to size this picture by going to Edit, Transform, Scale. And now I have my grid back that tells me that I can stretch this out to fit. And all I'm doing is making sure I've covered those red lines on the top and bottom, because on the left and right, my image was wide enough. It just wasn't tall enough for the ratio of a 4x6 card. Now I'm looking here and I see that I like this light. I like the banner. I don't want to lose any of that. And if it falls into the blue, between the blue and the black cut line, there's the tendency it might get lost. So I'm going to grab on the left side and enlarge this from there. It looks good. I'm going to hit enter. Now at this point, I have the picture in there. I have a postcard front, but I'm still seeing that template and my opacity was brought down to 50. And so I'm going to bring the opacity back up, and I do that making sure that I've clicked on the layer that is the picture. And I will bring this back up to 100%. I can see that I have some red line. So let me do one more correction. And again, I need to make sure I'm on the Shanghai layer. I'm going to go into Edit, Transform, Scale, and I'm going to bring that up. That will definitely fit. I hit enter to save it. I'm going to bring the opacity back up. Much better. No red all the way around. This image was taken in Japantown. It was taken on a rainy Sunday night. Shanghai is a throwback and kind of a nod to the old Chinatown that exists where Japantown now sits amongst the ramen shop and the manju shop and the lovely Nikkei traditions. This is my neighborhood, so I'm a little bit smitten with it. So now I have the front of the card. At this point, it is best to turn the little eyeball off on the background so that there's no potential of that bleeding through with the printer, because this will not be saved now. with that template in a viewable state. So we need to save this as, I always save it as a Photoshop file first. Now, there is going to be a way that you need to name your files for submission, and you'll see that in a bit. I have a slide that will take us through that. And I'm saving this as a Photoshop file in case I have to come back and fix something. But now let's save that JPEG. So I'm going to go back and do a save as. And literally, all I need to do is change this to be JPEG. That's it. If I click on, and you'll want to say this is a maximum size. If I click on image size, I can see that the template brought in the 6.25 by the 4.25. That is the template size that includes the cuts that the printer is going to make. The DPI is 200. And I didn't have to worry about this. So this is why you really want to start with that template, because you don't have to fight fixing it on the back end. So now I need a PDF of this. So for a PDF, we go into File, Export, Export As. Oops. Apologies. I'm going to back out of there. We'll do a file save as, not an export. My apologies on that. And we're going to say this is a Photoshop PDF. Now we have the PDF extension, and now we have the two files that the contest is going to look for. We've done our front side. I'm going to stop my share for a moment, and I want to check in. Does anybody have questions yet? Want me to back up and go over a piece? We're good? Thumbs up are great. Okay, great. So now we need to deal with the backside. If you're choosing to do one of the art pieces that's going to be a takeaway that both front and back need to be done, we are going to go back into Photoshop. And I'm going to follow the same process that I did to bring that first template in. I'm going to go find that template, which is this Wish You Were Here postcard layout template 4x6, page 2. I'm going to click and drag this directly into my icon for Photoshop. And there is my backside. There is no difference to the process that I did for the front to the back, except for one piece that I will show you so that we can keep this area clear. So I'm going to now add another image, and I could add the same one, but I'm choosing not to this time. I'm going to pick the Japanese lanterns that hang across the street during Obon. And this picture is from one of those events. And again, you can see I have the red that's showing. Now, pictures have an aspect ratio of how they were taken. If I were to just grab and pull this up, I'm going to stretch the lantern. And there are photographers that will be a little bit nitpicky and say that your aspect ratio is off. You've stretched it. So I'm just old school in that I grab a corner and I hold the shift key down so that the aspect ratio stays. Whether it's a square or rectangle, it doesn't make it lose its aspect ratio. But this time I'm going to use the other side because this light is already trimmed off a bit. So I will drag this up and I will drag this side down on the right. And I'm going to hit enter. And I have filled that template. Now, I didn't use the opacity this time to lower it because I could see that I needed to fit it to the red. If you don't believe me, I can lower the opacity to show you that, in fact, I'm filling that space. Now, I'm going to leave the opacity down on this one because there's that area here that I am not supposed to be touching, right? It needs to stay empty. And that is because the US Postal wants that so that their machinery can read the stuff. Also, this area here is where the barcode goes. You cannot put text in that space if you wish to put text. So I am going to now add a new layer. I'm going to make sure that I'm on my picture because I want this layer to go above the image. So I click a new layer, which is down here, the little plus next to the trash can. And I have a fresh layer. And this time it's pretty straightforward and simple. I just need a rectangle. I need to make sure that my picture doesn't show through in this one space. So I'm going to choose the rectangle tool. I'm going to make sure the fill here up on the toolbar is clear. I'm sorry, not clear, it's white. And that the stroke is actually not there. So I'm going to click the hash mark, the do not print, clear, transparent, however you wish to describe that. Now, when I come back in here, this space is going to go white. I can get, picky about it and push these little dots out to make sure it's a complete square corner. And now, if I make this background go away, I have a little bit of an issue. Because I've changed the opacity on that picture, I need to put something behind it. Otherwise, this weird gridding works. And so again, we are going to add another layer. And this time I'm clicking this layer I want it added, but I want it underneath that picture. Because remember, in Photoshop, it stacks going up. So whatever's at the top is seen if it's not covering something else. Now watch what happens when I use that same tool that I just used for the white rectangle for print space and go from edge to edge and create a white behind it. Now, yes, I changed the opacity on that picture. I didn't have to, but I'm thinking in terms of a postcard that somebody can write on and mail. I'm actually going to go and add some text now. If I left the opacity on this all the way up, the text would be tough to read because my image is a bright orange globe with a beautiful blue sky. So let me bring this back down. And now I'm going to add a little bit of text. I click the text box. I'm going to add some text right here. And I'm going to make sure I have a color that shows. And so I'm going to go with that dark blue. I'm going to make the text size Oh, come on. Command Z. Oh, come on, come on, come on. I love when there's technical difficulties.
I think it's useful as like faculty when you show troubleshooting. It helps everyone know that it's not just them.
There we go. Let me put this in again. I Command Z. Anytime you're on a Mac and you get stuck in an Adobe product, Command Z is your best friend. So I've got this text in here. The size is wrong. It's too big for what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to change the text size here again on the top toolbar. I'm going to change it from 36. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. And I'm liking this Rock Salt Pro that I'm using because it's a handwritten font. And so now I'm going to just type, wish you were here. And now I can play with it. I can decide that this needs to be bigger. That looks good. But I'd like it to look like I actually wrote it. So if I click on the text box and I click back into the text, when you come out to the edges of your text box, it gives you a very fast way to rotate it. And so that I can give it the ever slightest cant to the left to look like I wrote this. I click out of it and I now have text. And I now have a back that meets the requirements for what they're looking for if you choose to do this contest. You don't have to use text. It can be a graphic design if you wish. The saving is the same process as the other. You go into File. I'm going to do a Save As. I always do a Save As and make sure I'm doing a Photoshop file. And then I'll do a File Save As and save my JPEG. And I'll do one last file save, and make sure your the quality of the image is the maximum on the JPEG. And the last is a PDF, Photoshop PDF. So at this point, we have gone through all of the pieces to create the two sides. If you're choosing to just do the community postcard, you don't need to do this backside. You only need to do the backside if you're choosing it to be one of the artistic ones that are being mailed out to donors and that sort of thing. So now I'm going to, if there's no questions, let me stop share for a moment and check in. Everybody's still good? Still with me? Great. And now I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint so that we can get to, we did all of those. Okay. So some reminders about the files. We need to export both a JPEG and a PDF from Photoshop. Remember to turn off the visibility. Hit the little eyeball that is on the, that's the layer. It's the first layer in your file that is the template that we brought in. You will save the files with your last name, dash, first name, dash, postcard, dash, front. And then for the back, same protocol, except flip it to back. and you'll have a JPEG and a PDF of each one of these. These are the links for the Wish You Were Here website, as well as where you can find the postcard design submission instructions. It will be a Word document file that's got all of the info that I've gone through tonight. It'll go through the 4 different or the 5 different sub themes that are choosable. It will explain the art object versus the community postcard object. And then this last link is where you can find the templates out on the Google Drive. And so that was a very brief overview of some of the cultural history of San Jose and how to work with those templates. Any questions from anyone?
Well, round of applause, James. That was wonderful. Giving us a little bit of a cultural and historical lesson in addition to the technical components. Brilliant. Are there any questions? I want to let you know, if anybody is working with a template, this is also time where you can ask questions of us directly if you're stumped on something.
Hi, James. I have a question.
Great.
Okay. So the design could be anything, could be a photograph that I took, or it could be something that I made in Photoshop myself, like a design that I made, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The requirements, if you were to go out to that link that's got the breakdown, it explains you can use Illustrator, you can use Photoshop. It is not limited to just photography. It can be a graphic design piece. It can be a composited image, digital image that you've created with shapes and so forth that happen inside of Photoshop. So it's very broad reaching in what you're able to do. It just, you know, stick to those themes. And
yeah, yeah, so I wrote this to be as inclusive of all mediums and materials at San Jose State. So if you make a sculpture and want to submit documentation of that sculpture, or if you make a video and want to compile stills from that video, or if you're, I'm working with poets on submitting, you know, poetry. So it's meant to be as kind of open-ended as long as it's hitting the kind of thematics of the contest. So the judges will be judging based on those thematics that I've outlined. And even if you submit beautiful pieces of art, and that happened last contest, we got these beautiful submissions, but they weren't around those, the sheltering in place, sustainability, transformation, cultural, like intergenerational kind of connectivity and kind of cultural histories. If it's not hitting those points, it was the judges.
So it could hit something like a cultural ethnicity too. I mean, it could. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I kind of chose to intro with some of San Jose's cultural history, because there is so much of it. And when I was looking at a lot of what had been submitted the last go around, I was noticing that people weren't venturing into this, and we have such rich cultures in this community that I wanted to kind of push people that way.
Yeah. I mean, so much of like, so much of, you know, what the students come up with are like, you know, their own kind of personal responses. And I think it's important. Yeah, it's important to kind of follow the things that inspire you, because that's going to lead to better work, right?
You know, I do that, Rhonda.
I know you do, Suki. I'm not worried. Yeah, I'm not worried at all about that. So
no, even I do like to experiment other cultures, but I maybe it's my age, I don't know. I always end up going back to where my roots are, I guess.
I think that's wonderful, right? We all have different experiences in life that we bring to the table. I think it's lovely that you are open and experiment and kind of receive information.
Anyway, hi.
At the same time. Yeah, hi, good to see you.
Good to see you.
But at the same time, you do have your own experiences. And I think that, you know, it's been really rewarding to share. to share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
bringing
all.
it. Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone? I'm going to stop the recording so it doesn't have a whole lot of back end to it.
Thank you, James.